to the Common Hour. My name is Justin Hopkins, and I am the Assistant Director of the Writing Center, Senior Teaching Professor of English, and Chair of the Common Hour Committee, along with my co-chair this fall, Rachel Anderson Rayburn. I'd like to introduce our ASL interpreter, Emily Phipps. Thank you, Emily, for interpreting for us at Common Hour. Please note that if you need to change your screen view to include Emily as you watch, you can adjust your screen display mode in the small box labeled View towards the upper right of the Zoom window. You can enable the closed captioning if you like. A very warm welcome to all. The Common Hour is an unique and inclusive program that brings the Franklin and Marshall College community together weekly during the academic year for culturally and intellectually enriching events. It is the only regularly scheduled event that unites students, faculty, and staff and invites the larger community to join us. Throughout the pandemic, the Common Hour has continued to provide a virtual gathering space and a source of inspiration, education, and compelling discussion for the F&M community and beyond. Next week's Common Hour is the last event of this semester and a panel discussion entitled Living with COVID, Lessons from the Past, Looking to the Future. Please follow Common Hour on our webpage, the Presence Events calendar, and our F&M Common Hour Facebook and Instagram pages. During today's event, Zoom viewers can submit questions for our speaker via the Q&A feature. Please indicate your affiliation with the college, but we don't need your name. And now I'd like to introduce Provost Cam Wesson.
Provost. Thank you, Justin, and welcome everyone to Common Hour. It's a pleasure and an honor to introduce today's Common Hour speaker, Dr. Jennifer L. Morford. Dr. Morford is F&M Professor of Chemistry and the most recent recipient of the Christian R. and Mary E. Lindback Distinguished Teaching Award. She received her BS from Boston College and her PhD from the University of Washington. Her research utilizes chemical analyses of marine sediments to address trace metal cycling, which permits a better understanding of metal accumulation over time in marine environments. Professor Morford is a wonderful teacher, scholar, and mentor who balances intellectual challenges with warmth and welcome. All of her teaching spaces are designed to engage students in careful scientific analysis in an environment that allows them to reach their fullest potential. Her teaching innovations focus on helping students reflect on their own learning to achieve agency and engagement. Professor Morford's intense interest in, support for, and willingness to adapt to students' needs is seen in her students' successful careers and well-being. She's a model teacher, scholar, and mentor, changing the lives of her students and improving our campus culture. Professor Morford has mentored numerous F&M students in a variety of contexts. She's found those experiences to be one of the best parts of her job, and they've inspired her to learn more about mentorship. Today, she will share both information from the literature about mentorship, along with her personal experiences of being both a mentee and a mentor. Please join me in welcoming Professor Morford.
Thank you so much, Professor Wesson, Emily, for providing our ASL interpretation today, and the Common Hour Committee for providing this space for me to share my thoughts on mentorship. I want to begin with a disclaimer by saying that I do not study mentorship as part of my scholarship, nor do I study it as part of my research. I've never taken a class in mentorship at all or published on the topic. But mentorship has been an undercurrent in my life. I have had smaller and larger opportunities to mentor at F&M, as an academic advisor, as a professor in a class, as a posse mentor, thank you, Miami Posse, as a research mentor, many pictured here with my posse, and through the casual hallway and campus conversations that happen every day on our campus. These relationships occur within my context of who I am, a white woman who's a professor at a small liberal arts college, and who the students are, a changing and diverse group of individuals from different backgrounds and with different identities. These experiences have inspired me to learn more about mentorship and how to be a more effective mentor. In addition to being a mentor, I have also been a mentee. I have been on the receiving end of mentorship, both before FNM, and I will be sharing some of those stories today, as Provost Wesson mentioned, but also at FNM, because mentorship and being a mentee does not end when you become a professional. I have greatly benefited from the mentorship of all of my colleagues in the chemistry department, especially Ken Hess and Claude Yoder, and my colleagues outside of my department, Professors Carol DeWitt, Maria Mitchell, and Alexis Castor. All of these relationships and experiences have impacted how I teach, how I do my research, how I engage with college service, and how I work with my students. They have provided profound support and help during important transitions in my life that have subtly and substantially influenced my trajectory. Yes, as a professional, having mentors has continued to be important. This seminar is the result of what I've learned from reading the literature and attending conferences. And some of what I share with you today may also echo your own experiences. This is perfect. This is my effort then to help you explicitly acknowledge and recognize all the different aspects of mentorship. Again, it will be presented within the context of an academic, because I am a faculty member at a college, but the ideas can be extended more broadly to your personal life and your professional life. I will also, again, share some of my experiences that I've had, and that with hindsight, some of which I would have handled differently. So to start, I want to pause for a moment and ask you to think about a time in your life when someone else shared their knowledge, their skills, their time, and their insight with you, and how that felt. Now I want you to take another moment and think about a time in your life when you shared your knowledge, your skills, your time, your insight to help someone else, and how that felt. You are reflecting on spaces where you were probably the mentee and spaces where you were probably the mentor. This exercise highlights how we play both roles throughout our lives. And if these memories were positive and meaningful to you, then you probably already know something about mentorship and how important it can be for you and for others. And you're right. Felton and Lambert, in their recent book, tell us that a student's interactions with peers, faculty, staff, they positively influence the breadth and depth of their learning, their retention and graduation rates, but also other developmental spaces, such as critical thinking, identity development, communication skills, and leadership. As described in the same book, a 2014 Gallup-Purdue poll of 30,000 college graduates found that if an employed graduate had a professor who cared about them as a person, one who made them excited about learning, and had a mentor who encouraged them to pursue their dreams, that individual reported higher levels of workplace engagement and thriving in their well-being after graduation. More simply put, and this is my only equation in this talk today, is that a caring professor plus an encouraging mentor can make substantial differences post-college. Other scholarship describes not only the impact of mentorship on the mentee, the receiver, but also on the mentor, suggesting that mentorship experiences for the mentor can increase job satisfaction and feelings of well-being within your own space. So my goals today include sharing my understanding of mentors and mentorship, to provide two frameworks as ways to think about mentorship, and some thoughts on what successful mentorship might look like and what we might want to consider doing differently if we want to be better at it. And because we wear both hats, mentor and mentee, in our lives, hopefully this conversation will be valuable to everyone. As I tell my students in class, When we move into any new topic, it helps to define our terms and our vocabulary. There are many definitions of the word mentor and mentorship in the literature. The word mentor comes from a character in Homer's Odyssey, here a graphic novel adaptation and recommended to me years ago by Professor Zach Biles in our classics department. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, went to fight the Trojan Wars. He assumed he would be gone for a while, although that turned out to be an understatement. And so he left his son Telemachus at home and asked a trusted friend named Mentor to advise and teach his son in his absence. And in this way, the first mentor was both a guide and an educator. A recent report from the National Academy of Sciences defines mentorship as a professional working alliance in which individuals work together over time to support the personal and professional growth, development, and success of the relational partners through the provision of career and psychosocial support. I really like this definition because I like the term working alliance, which is meant to emphasize an active collaboration between mentor and mentee. The inclusion also of both career and psychosocial support highlights both the academic and professional guidance that occurs in parallel with emotional support, both in an effort to promote the formation of a strong identity related to intellectual interests, along with the confidence to contribute in those spaces. There is also some confusion sometimes in the vocabulary related to mentor-like roles. For example, an advisor. An advisor might focus on a specific event, such as registration for classes, which many of our students have been working through. Your advisor should have expertise in this area with knowledge of how to find what courses are available related to the student interests. The advisor is available to give advice and or answer questions, and this tends to be an advisor-directed interaction. A coach in this context might be focused on addressing specific issues to help a student identify a goal and to develop solutions through questions that lead the student to an appropriate answer. This type of coaching might happen within the context of helping a student learn how to write a paper or how to answer a problem. Through feedback, a coach can encourage new ways of thinking to help the students identify strategies and processes that could apply to new scenarios in the future. A role model provides an example of professional behavior, attitudes, and values, but a role model might not necessarily involve a relationship. And a sponsor might be somebody who helps to publicly acknowledge the achievements of someone else in an effort to increase their recognition, but again, might do so in a targeted way and related only to a specific event. A mentor relationship might include aspects of advisor, coach, role model, and sponsor. A mentor will include conversations that focus on intellectual development, will share information based on their own expertise and experiences, and will help with the formation of a network with others who have different expertise, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But the relationship goes beyond the technical to that psychosocial support mentioned in the earlier report that addresses and enhances a mentee's sense of competence, identity, and effectiveness. These different positions represent a spectrum of guidance, and a mentor will move among and between these roles depending on the needs of the mentee and the status of the mentorship relationship. There are also different types of mentors and relationships that we can consider. Perhaps the classic view would be a one-on-one mentor relationship that would be similar to the apprenticeship model. While I can't think of the reality show when I think about this model, I can instead think about Mickey Mouse. Portrayed in The Sorcerer's Apprentice in both the original movie Fantasia and the sequel Fantasia 2000, Mickey Mouse seeks to replicate the skills and knowledge of his mentor, the wizard. This is a limited view that fails to acknowledge the varied relationships held by mentors and mentees, and it limits or ignores the mentee's role, agency, and ownership in their mentored experience. And it certainly didn't work out very well for the mouse when he tried to express his agency in their relationship and was told that was not appropriate. So instead of focusing on an apprenticeship model that is focused on skill transfer, we could instead consider a mentor's role to be to amplify the capital of the student, to help the student stay and thrive through mentoring that is custom fitted for the person that you are working with. In this context, we could consider culturally responsive mentoring. Mentors that value cultural and social diversity within their mentoring relationships and are able to acknowledge and value the students' socio-cultural based experiences and backgrounds to help the mentees navigate a college experience that at times can be difficult, while also affirming their belonging within an academic discipline and reinforcing their self-efficacy, which is their ability to believe that they can accomplish their goals. When a mentor does not share the same culture or social identity, then they have to be willing to listen and to be comfortable with less familiar ways of interacting and communicating. As discussed in Womack et al., cultural responsiveness in mentoring means reflecting on your own identity, considering how cultural identities can impact relationships, building communication skills, and finally considering how feelings of belonging or feelings like you don't belong can influence pathways, student decisions, and the mentoring relationship. A broader view of mentorship beyond the one-on-one includes the idea of a web of mentors or mentoring constellations. It can be difficult to find a mentor that meets all of your interests and all of your needs, which also change and evolve as you move along your path. Instead, be open to the frequent opportunities you have to connect with peers, faculty, staff, and others on and off campus to create a constellation of mentors. This network of overlapping relationships is more likely to meet your evolving needs while providing you a diverse community. And this web of mentors provides individuals who can then act as a sounding board when you are seeking inspiration, provide specific information, challenge your assumptions, console you when you are low, help bring clarity regarding a path to follow or even what paths are available, while also sharing opportunities that really should be considered even if you aren't quite sure you are enough. Within this structure, we can also consider co-mentoring, which can require, as described by Hill et al., quote, sidelining fear, managing ego, practicing adaptability, approaching the boundaries of expertise, taking intellectual risks, and allowing mutual vulnerability and growth within the mentoring relationship. And this is between mentors. Only a few years ago, I began a wonderful new collaboration for a project with Dr. Kate Plass in our chemistry department. Co-mentoring our research students on this project was challenging because it involved taking intellectual risks on a new project, contributing and respecting our individual expertise, while also seeing the growth in our mutual understanding of each other's perspectives as the project matured. It also provided an opportunity for our students on this project to see us move through this space as well. This was not always comfortable, but being uncomfortable provided spaces for learning, adaptation, and growth for us as mentors. Peer and near-peer mentorship is a unique form of mentoring within this web of mentors as well. Because of the proximity to the same stage of development and engagement with similar pathways, courses, or concerns, these peer and near-peer mentors are uniquely positioned to provide mentees with both academic and emotional support. They can simultaneously enhance self-efficacy, again, that feeling that objectives are obtainable, and feelings of belonging, while also decreasing feelings of isolation. The power hierarchy that can be a barrier for some in mentor-mentee relationships can be minimized or removed through peer sharing and support. At F&M, we have a rich and varied peer and near-peer mentorship tradition that extends to include preceptors, HAs, peer academic mentors, first-year advisors, writing tutors, QNSC tutors, international peer mentors, in addition to the near-peer mentorship that is also inherent in athletics among team members, within fraternities and sororities, and in the many club spaces on campus. All of these spaces provide those peer and near-peer mentorship opportunities while also providing accessible spaces for our students to practice the skills necessary to become a successful mentor. I consider many of my conversations with my colleagues in the chemistry department as peer mentorship. When my colleagues share a new approach for introducing a topic, preparing a lab, a new approach to how to think about how to do something in the classroom, or even set up a Canvas page, they are sharing their knowledge and skills. And when they provided support during COVID, when we transitioned to online teaching, my self-efficacy increased. I felt more effective as a professor and as a professional, not only because they helped with my skill development, but also because they simultaneously decreased my feelings of isolation, increased my feelings of belonging, again, both critical during time of COVID. Finally, we can consider mentors of the moment, just-in-time mentoring, or even called mentoring on the run. A mentor of the moment is the casual conversation that you have down the hall, across campus, or at the cafe. It might be a short conversation, but it provides some nugget of information, a suggestion, or a connection that can be transformative. And this reminds me of a day in high school, sitting with a friend in our chemistry class before class starting, discussing a situation with our school band. A beloved band director had just left. And with that change came a lot of anxiety for how the new director would take over. My friend reflected that this was probably the best time to leave the band and consider other school activities. My chemistry teacher, who had been quietly listening the entire time, turned to us both and said, "Sometimes moments of change with the associated anxiety are times to leave, but sometimes they present us with an opportunity to engage in ways that might result in greater investment and surprising outcomes." I have reflected on that conversation, which happened over 30 years ago, many times in my life, and used that reflection to help me make decisions in different situations. There doesn't seem to be conclusive evidence in the literature for which mentoring configuration, one-on-one, a web of mentors, or a mentor of the moment, that would be optimal for mentorship, mentor, and mentee outcomes. We can consider, though, that it's likely that different configurations of mentorship are critical throughout our time in college and later as professionals. So now that we've talked about mentorship and some of the vocabulary that surrounds it, I'd like for a moment now to turn to some frameworks for how we might think about mentorship. Individuals who devote their scholarship and their research to mentorship have put together different frameworks whose purpose is to help us develop a better understanding and context for mentorship. These frameworks provide language, theory that we can use to help guide how we talk and think about mentorship. There are many different frameworks of mentorship, but the literature is silent regarding a definitive model when thinking about it. And in fact, it's probably a combination of several models that would create a useful understanding. I am only going to highlight two frameworks that have helped me to think about mentorship: social capital theory and ecological systems theory. In social capital theory, we first have to define social capital. Social capital is the sum of knowledge, information, and resources that you obtain from your social network, and it exists in the exchange of information that occurs between mentor and mentee. Social capital theory then builds on the assets and experiences of individuals, stressing the importance of positioning individuals within key networks to help them obtain vital information for success. So why does social capital theory provide me a framework for mentorship? When I was in college, I was able to participate in the nuclear chemistry summer school. I was able to take a course in a topic that wasn't offered at my college over the summer. And it provided me an opportunity to get on a plane for the first time, to visit California for the first time. And it turned out to be the same program that my colleague, Professor Ed Fenlon, was selected for several years earlier. As part of that program, we had individual time with our professor. He listened to my thoughts and plans for after college and provided information regarding appropriate graduate school options with the associated promise of a letter of recommendation. At the time, I didn't know anything about graduate programs or which ones I should consider, but he recognized my potential. He understood what I knew, and he then provided his experience and knowledge to position me for a successful transition to graduate school. The other framework I'd like to share with you is the ecological systems theory. This framework puts mentorship in a space where we think about it in terms of small, big, and temporal systems. So the one-on-one relationship between a mentor and a mentee would be considered at the microsystem level. The mesosystem level would include the mentor and maybe one of the mentee's professors being able to interact with one another and their relationship. Understanding the mentee's position in their family or hometown or their country would be the ecosystem level. The macrosystem level would include cultural influences, such as a disruption felt through national politics or international instability. And the chronosystem level would be looking at changes over time as expressed through the past, the present, and the future. And this theory then looks at the connections across all of these different systems. When we use the ecological systems theory of mentoring to put our mentor-mentee relationship into context, we are forced to broaden the context of that relationship to include a department, the major, the college, families at home, activities happening on the national and international stage, like a pandemic, and changes over time. Some research has suggested that the most effective mentorship explicitly acknowledges this interconnectedness systems and how both the immediate microsystem and the more distant macro and chronosystem levels can influence success. We could then be better mentors if we're able to consider mentorship within this much larger context of systems. And I believe my PhD advisor, Dr. Steve Emerson at the University of Washington, had a chronosystem level perspective with respect to his graduate students. I should first explain that in the same way a person can think about their family genealogy, identifying parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents back through time, so do professors. Instead, we also think about an academic genealogy as we trace back from one advisor to the previous advisor. And the academic genealogies that grace the hallways of the third floor Hackman building were completed by Dr. Scott Van Armen, a member of our department, and this is mine. I loved looking back in time to see who mentored, who advised, who was the PhD advisor back all the way to the 1600s. And I was surprised to find that an early tangential advisor in my genealogy was Benjamin Rush, a charter member of the Board of Trustees of Franklin College, which later became Franklin and Marshall. What also struck me when I first saw my academic genealogy was the absence of any women along this space, until Dr. Steve Emerson, who not only worked with me, but worked with 6 women to earn their master's or PhDs. He understood his place in time, and it impressed upon me how one mentor or one advisor who's willing to work with different students can change the chronosystem. Keeping this framework in mind has been one of the most important and transformative parts of my mentor experiences with my students. Explicitly acknowledging the broader and interconnected systems in which our students navigate their academic life has given me more information for how to connect them with the information they need. I have gotten a better perspective on the deep challenges and the wonderful accomplishments that they have had as students at FNM. So in applying social capital theory, we need to remember to acknowledge and self-reflect on how both the mentor and the mentee are able to access information, skills, resources, and networking connections, and how both bring that information into a mentorship relationship. Applying the ecosystem approach requires acknowledging how these various systems, from small to big, near and distant, present and future, can impact a mentee's life. And both of these frameworks then provide different helpful ways for us to think about and contextualize mentorship. So now that we have some definitions, we have some frameworks at our disposal, I now would like to talk a little bit about how best to cultivate an environment for effective mentorship. And the very first step would be finding a mentor if you feel you have not yet identified one. First, keep in mind that mentorship can occur formally as a designated relationship as part of an assigned cohort or through an ongoing relationship with a peer tutor or advisor, but it can also occur more informally from a spontaneous relationship that occurs based on mutual interests, trust, and comfort. Both formal and informal mentoring should be considered as complementary and overlapping forms of support. It can also be helpful to use a mentor map, and I've included an example here. This is an explicit way for you to identify the spaces where mentorship would be helpful and beneficial to you. As I navigated having young children in my early years at the college, I know that I went out of my way to connect with colleagues and friends who were or already had moved through similar spaces. They were willing to share their knowledge and skills about how to navigate school friendships, homework, sports, and music, while also providing the support that said, this is possible and you can do this. Is it important to have same race and same gender pairings for mentors and mentees? According to an analysis of the literature in the National Academy of Sciences report, the literature is mixed on this topic. Yes, one could expect greater psychosocial support with similarities on key visible identities, for example, shared race or gender, or invisible identities, such as sexual orientation or gender identity, perhaps due to a deeper understanding of shared experiences of underrepresentation or background. That shared space can also help with the development of trust and interpersonal comfort. But this can be more difficult when there are not a majority of mentors who share your visible identity, or when invisible identities are hard to see. Students can also look for mentors who share other deep-level similarities, such as shared interests, values, and goals that are also important for forming effective mentoring relationships, even across cultural differences. So I would like to pause for another moment and ask you to reflect, to think about someone who might fit into this mentorship map for you. It could be someone you already know or someone you would like to meet, but take a moment to think about a person. Now, I would like for you to write down that name and seek to intentionally connect with that individual. But what if you're still uncertain? What if you're uncertain where to find a mentor? Then I'd like for you to consider more broadly that every new course, every time you take a job or even interview for a job, every time a friend introduces you to another staff member or professor, every time you connect with an alumni to talk about professional pathways, every time you attend a performance or a seminar, you are creating the spaces to find a mentor. You can also speak with others who have mentors or the peer mentors as opportunities to learn how they have navigated finding mentors. I am inviting you to make connections with the people around you on and beyond our campus. Once you have navigated finding a mentor, you then also want to establish a positive mentor relationship. Effective mentorship involves this positive relationship that needs to contain both academic support and that emotional support, confidence boosting, and role modeling. We can consider the co-pilot relationship as a way to conceptualize this positive experience. Co-pilots must share trust and communication to reach a commonly agreed upon destination. In the same way, mentors and mentees should also follow common themes to develop and cultivate this positive relationship. The first step might be communicating expectations. This is an opportunity for both mentor and mentee to share any specifics. For example, if a mentee is hoping that their mentor will help to build a web of mentors or to help find opportunities, then they should bring that forward into the relationship. Overall, the mentors need to create a safe space for mentees to be able to share those expectations. We can also consider mentorship as a collaboration based on trust, intentionality, and shared responsibility. Trust is critical for working together to identify and respond to mutual goals, much like co-pilots. Intentionality suggests a coordinated approach to effectively meet the needs within a particular context. And a shared responsibility means that this is not an apprenticeship model or a one-way relationship. The mentee needs to bring questions, concerns, and comments and feedback to the relationship, while the mentor needs to be available, transparent in interactions, and careful with the limits of their ability. Open communication is also key for building a rapport in a positive relationship, and it will promote ongoing conversations. This requires the mentor being available, actively and carefully listening, providing timely and constructive feedback, and recognizing that communication styles can differ. This might require work as the mentor and mentee navigate a communication style that will be effective for them. And then finally, addressing equity and inclusion is an important aspect of a positive mentored relationship. Addressing equity and inclusion means having the mentor reflect on and account for any biases or assumptions that they bring into the relationship, with explicit acknowledgement for how their background might differ from the mentees. A confirmation bias, it worked for me and therefore should work for you, is not often going to be effective. Because self-efficacy and academic identity can intersect with social identities, a mentor needs to understand how various identities interact and intersect. As mentors, we can validate a mentee's multiple identities by showing interest in and valuing their cultural backgrounds and their social identities outside of their academic spaces, because these identities will influence a mentee's experiences prior to college, in college, and after college. This culturally responsive mentorship approach can bring a deeper understanding of the whole student outside of just the academic space. Engaging in meaningful conversations. If we want to be able, we've found our mentor, we've established a positive relationship, and we now want to engage in meaningful conversations. And the very first part is to include specific knowledge and guidance. As a mentor, this is where the intersection of mentorship and advisor overlap the most. As mentors, we can be curious about other people's experiences. We can be willing to listen so that you can better understand barriers that might exist, and so that you can use your role in academia to help them further their academic and career goals. We are professionals in our areas of specialty and in the workings of the college. We can provide key insight into graduation requirements, major, minor program details, how to find a job on campus or off, how to connect with a research opportunity, and how to connect with current and pressing regional issues in our local area. Some of this information includes topics that we take for granted, either because we've been here for a long time or we grew up in a family of individuals who all attended college. It requires careful listening to discern where there may be a misunderstanding regarding how something works at the college level, or to support a student with an unfamiliar process, such as course registration or applying to study abroad. And when we're at our best, we might not provide an answer. Instead, through a series of prompts, we help our mentees organize their thoughts, clarify what they really want to know and why, and then how to find and interpret that information. As a mentee, this is where we have to remember that mentors are not mind readers. Learn how to be an advocate for what you want. For example, we want every student to be successful, to have a meaningful journey that is full of discovery and excitement, which can also include challenging work, disappointment, resilience, and reward. And finally, to launch into a future that is rich in possibilities. But mentors don't always know what a mentee really wants, and sometimes we make poor assumptions. Be specific about your needs as a mentee and your goals so that your mentor can support you. So specific knowledge and guidance, okay? But we also, as establishing a positive environment and engaging in meaningful conversations, we also need to create space for students to be heard. This can be particularly difficult for academics, professors, professional staff, and perhaps just about everyone who works or lives on a college campus. We spend all of our time trying to figure out how new novel ways to answer questions and arrive at new solutions, how to engage students in class in a meaningful way, how to get scientific instrumentation to work, and then how to interpret the results. All of our how-to moments involve us reflecting on our own experiences, what has worked for us or for students we've worked with in the past and what hasn't, and perhaps learning new information and integrating that new information into a novel solution that provides the answer to how to. The harder encounters are when a mentor needs to actively listen and then be able to say, I see you, I hear you. That's really difficult, and it must be very hard. An experience I had in graduate school connects me to this. I was helping a cohort of students in the oceanography department. For their senior thesis, they had gone on a research cruise, and upon their return, I was to assist any student that had samples that wanted to measure metal concentrations. I had arranged to meet one student to help with his analyses, and he never showed up. At our next meeting, I expressed my disappointment that he had missed our meeting, seeking to establish clear expectations for how we would work together. After a moment, he explained that he was a young single father and his child had been unexpectedly sick that day. We were then able to brainstorm how to move forward, but it would have been better to have initially provided him the space to tell me what had happened so that I could listen, he could feel heard, and we could both acknowledge the humanity of the situation, that life is messy, but communication is important. Another aspect of meaningful conversations include the warm handoff. So what is a warm handoff? It is the act of introducing someone to those with special expertise. It could be connecting with a learning specialist, a preceptor, or a peer tutor. It could be connecting with somebody from the fellowship office or somebody in counseling from the wellness center. As mentors, it's okay to say, I don't know everything. Recognize the limits of what you know. Listen carefully so that you can accurately direct your mentee to the best space. As a mentee, this is not meant as a brush off or a redirection. We all need, as mentees, to develop an intersecting web of mentors who have complementary knowledge, expertise, wisdom, and backgrounds, and that will generate the greatest benefit in your web of mentors. We also need to know that meaningful conversations can happen both during high and low times. As mentors, we love to celebrate the improved paper, the excellent exam, the new internship, or the exciting new class. But we also need to be available for the failed exam, the illness or injury that derails a course or participation in a sport, the bad decision, either personally or academically, that has difficult consequences, the loss of a family member, missing home, or feelings of loneliness because you just have not yet established a strong network of friends on campus. As mentees, if you are comfortable within your relationship with your mentor, be as open and as honest as you feel able. A mentor is not expecting everything to always go well, and it's okay to share when it's not. And the last aspect of this meaningful conversation idea is to think about the concept of planting a seed. As a mentor, you need to be okay with never being sure whether your advice or information or even suggestion will make a difference. You need to respect your mentee's agency in making decisions regarding the pathways they will take and the actions they will follow. From the mentee's point of view, when we receive advice, sometimes it doesn't make sense or it doesn't yet feel right. Reflect on the conversation so that you have the opportunity to use it later. And both mentors and mentees can then consider this as similar to planting seeds. Some will sprout and will be a moment of reflection in the future, but you really don't know which of those comments or suggestions might connect or might not, and you just have to acknowledge that. So now we need to be honest for a moment, because there are times when mentorship doesn't work. So I would like for you to take a moment and think of a time when a mentor relationship or conversation didn't go as planned. This may not have been a comfortable memory for you, and it might have involved one or several of the following. Because there are barriers to mentorship that include imposter syndrome, feelings of inadequacy, isolation, fear, or shame. All of these feelings can make it difficult to find a mentor or to feel comfortable enough within that relationship so that you can get the most out of it. These feelings are common among college students and faculty and staff, but they are not necessarily evenly distributed. And if you feel this way, you might not want to seek to build relationships because you might not feel like you're worth the time. Another barrier could be a lack of education, feeling so ill-prepared that you don't feel that you can enter into a mentorship relationship, either as a mentee or as a mentor. There can also be negative mentorship experiences. They can arise from a mentor-mentee mismatch in working or communication styles, values, or just personalities. But it can also arise from otherwise good intentions. For example, a mentor might decide to not mention an opportunity because they're concerned that the mentee is completely overwhelmed. However, the mentee might be interpreting that as a lack of confidence in their ability. So communication in that space can, or a lack of communication, can result in a negative mentorship experience. So how do we move forward? To overcome a barrier of imposter syndrome, consider first connecting with a peer mentor. Sometimes a peer or near peer mentor can seem less intimidating, and they can then help you strategize how to connect with other mentors on campus. Creating a web of mentors can take time, but with every relationship you form, it might be easier to make the next connection. To overcome a lack of preparation, know that the best preparation is to enter into a mentor relationship with a willingness to actively listen and to be fully present for the conversations. Because negative mentoring experiences occur even when well-intentioned, mentors need to be open to addressing unintended negative experiences with other individuals who can assist in processing the experience and charting a path forward. Mentees also need to remember that a negative mentoring experience is not evidence that all mentoring experiences will be negative. Mentees also need to process these experiences with another trusted individual so as to determine the best way to move through and past this experience. And finally, I'd like to be able to share with you some ideas for becoming a better mentor and a better mentee. Some mentors and mentees have an absolute natural aptitude for forming these relationships, but for most of us, mentorship is a learnable skill that requires instruction, practice, feedback, self-reflection, intention, and time. So let's talk about mentees first. Being a mentee requires the knowledge and hopefully training so as to maximize the chances for success. But the overall goal here is to help all of us as mentees to be more proactive in our mentorship relationships. And so how can we cultivate, and nurture these relationships? Well, here are some possible actions. First, reflect on your expectations for that mentorship relationship so that you can effectively communicate and interact with your mentor. Develop a mentor map, perhaps in collaboration with a friend, a mentor, or an advisor, to identify the areas where support and specific mentorship would be valuable to you and to develop a diverse support system. Specifically engage with peer mentors to hear their perspective and to learn from their recent experiences. And if and when you're able, become a peer mentor so as to apply the lessons that you have learned to a new mentoring relationship. This will promote building an identity that includes being a mentor. Be willing to prepare for this experience by learning the necessary skills and reflecting on the experiences you've had as a mentee to prepare you to become the best mentor you can be. And for mentors, we need to recognize that even experienced mentors can learn new strategies. Research on mentorship, as summarized by the National Academy of Sciences report, suggests that even short opportunities for mentorship education can be valuable, for example, leading to improved communication skills. Possible actions include having conversations in small groups to provide spaces for reading relevant literature to learn best practices, obtain new resources, and learn evidence-based approaches. To become aware of the resources across and around campus and within your professional network so that as a mentor, you're able to help to extend your mentees network. Engage in training and/or education opportunities when available that can help identify your own personal biases and prejudices that can be brought into a mentor relationship so that you can effectively work with mentees from different backgrounds and social identities. And to consider reflection questions as part of your self-reflective process. And those questions could include, am I using both formal advising meetings and other informal meetings to engage with others? Am I listening to understand rather than listening to respond? Am I sharing my knowledge, guidance, and support? Am I using my connections to help others form valuable networks? And am I seeking ways to be a more effective mentor? Please look for an opportunity in May at the end of, probably after the spring 2022 semester, when Drs. Amy Molnix, Kabi Hartman, and I will be organizing some time for faculty and staff to read and reflect on mentorship. Information will come out later in the spring, but as we all find ourselves in mentor and mentee positions, we hope this will be a chance to continue this conversation and to develop our skills. As a final comment on the topic of mentorship, I also cite a recent blog on how kindness is part of an excellent STEM education that suggests that being kind can make a tremendous difference. So one last story for you. As a chemistry major in college, I was working on a senior research project. It was a college holiday, and I was alone in the computer lab working on data, frustrated that I did not completely understand what I was doing. My undergraduate research advisor, Professor Mike Clark, who was often there, came in and sat next to me and asked how it was going. He listened to my complaints and frustrations, and he answered a few brief questions. He then offered me some soda and suggested that I enjoy the sunny holiday outside with my peers. In that brief exchange, he validated my belonging in his group. He conveyed permission to be frustrated, but also the confidence to walk away from it for a moment, after which it turned out it was much easier to understand. Mentorship is a way for us to connect as humans. As expressed so well in this article about kindness, the massive disruption in education due to COVID has inspired many to greater expressions of compassion and kindness. Humanizing education through really listening and recognizing individual experiences is at the heart of mentoring. And I want to thank you for listening and for thinking about mentorship.
Thank you so much for broadening certainly my perspective on what it means to mentor and be mentored. It brought back a lot of memories from time at F&M as a student and certainly over the last years as professional staff and faculty. We have several questions here, and the first one is from a faculty member. How have you observed the concept or the experience of mentorship changing in academia throughout your career?
I think that's an excellent question. Personally, I can say that when I first engaged in mentorship as an academic, I took it much more as an advisor than as a mentor. So I know that I did not initially broaden my own personal engagement with mentorship beyond the advisor relationship until I got to know our students better and got thinking about what are their needs and what will make them have a successful relationship. And it really came out of working with my research students, where we broadened those conversations to include graduate opportunities, broader interests, other classes, their musical performances, and all of the aspects that came into their space. And I think that the conversation in the literature has also evolved to include the importance of that psychosocial relationship with students, of how are we listening, actively listening to our mentees and thinking about their feelings of belonging, their feelings of agency in the decisions that they make, and the connections across their other bigger and smaller spaces that they interact with. When I looked at the literature, it seemed like there had been a definite progression in the importance of that emotional support for academic success.
Thank you. There's another question from another faculty member here, which seems to follow nicely. Seriously, though, from that question and answer. Thanks for this presentation. I especially appreciate and agree with the importance of a network of mentors rather than a single mentor. My question, you seem to assume that negative mentoring relationships are unconscious or inadvertent, but there's a well-known problem of sexual harassment in mentoring relationships, and I would add other perhaps deliberate problems, especially because the power dynamic is so evident. Do you have any advice on that?
I so appreciate that person bringing that forward. Yes, absolutely. Harassment, bullying, sometimes intentional, definitely intentional in some spaces. I think that the power hierarchy in that relationship can make negative mentoring a definite problem. And this is known across, that is not an issue only in academia. This is definitely an issue in many professional spaces as well. I think what is helpful I'm thinking now from the mentee's point of view, is to understand what a positive mentoring relationship looks like, and to know that you are worth that, and that you need to recognize when a mentoring relationship is bad, is negative, and to be able to process that information with someone else who can help affirm your understanding that this is not appropriate, and that it is appropriate for you to disengage from that relationship. In my reading, there definitely were the National Academy of Sciences report had a very detailed section that discussed how important it is for mentees to process that kind of experience when it does happen.
I also really appreciated how powerfully you emphasized the importance of kindness in these relationships. Seems obvious, but it's so resonant. We have a question here from a staff member who asks, I wonder who can be a mentor in a department. Can a supervisor or their supervisor be a mentor? Are there conflicts of interest between mentor and someone in a supervisory role? Are there aspects of mentorship that every supervisor should embrace?
I think, first off, every individual has the power to be a mentor, and every individual has the power to be a mentee. And some of those mentored relationships could happen between a supervisor and someone who is working with you. Some of those mentored relationships can happen in a graded space, a faculty member who is grading you, and yet they are also your mentor. I think that adds a little layer of complexity to that relationship, but it is not uncommon. We learn from and are mentored by the people that we make connections with. And they may be people that you work with, or they may be a person that you're taking a class from. And I think that all of those spaces are still important spaces for mentorship. I don't think we should ever preclude somebody just because somebody is in my class that I would refuse to mentor them, or that somebody who is working with you, that you should feel uncomfortable mentoring them.
Thank you. I have a final question here, which we might not have time to answer in full. This is a question and comment from a faculty member. Thank you so very much for this informative and inspiring talk about mentorship. I'm curious to hear what kinds of structural changes F&M might make to facilitate more extensive and better mentorship, both between faculty and students, and within the faculty and within the student body. And I know that you mentioned something coming up in May, possibly re-emphasizing that.
Yes, so I think a little education goes a long way. I think giving the opportunity to read and reflect is really important. And so I think being able to include some of those opportunities, I think at this point, from a faculty and staff perspective, where we're able to gather in small groups and reflect on our own experiences in the literature, can help us be better at our craft. I think also as our students engage in peer mentorship opportunities, the training that is inherent in those spaces can very often be productive in them becoming not only peer mentors, but reflecting on their mentee positions as well. And so I think as what we should do moving forward, I'm hoping that we continue to lean into those opportunities, both through the faculty center and through other spaces that bring us together as a full community who value the mentorship that happens on this campus every day.
Thank you. So well said. Thank you once again, Professor Morford, for sharing with us your experiences. Thank you so much, Emily, for interpreting for us today. And we want to thank all of you for joining us today at Common Hour, and we hope that you will join us once more this semester next week. For now, have a good day. Have a good week.